Oh, we are going live. All right. I hope everybody's happy because I sure am. Happy to be here. All right. So, we're going to cover some crazy stuff tonight. This is a really long one. This is going to be on trial preparation, courtroom preparation for family court. And that is a mouthful. And because, like all things we do in this, when we're looking at family court and when we're looking at whatever preparation that goes into this, it's going to be really deep and really thorough. And what I want to tell you, if you're looking at this, if you're getting ready for anything with family court, that you understand that your case is extremely individual. It is something that cannot be covered in just a simple video or a complicated video like this. So I want you to pay attention. I want you to learn this, understand that these are tools so that you can move forward and get some wins. And at this point, I really believe there's such a myth about what family court is. There's such a myth about false allegations. There's such a myth about things like NPD or how they affect you. You can win in this. It's very difficult. It's hard, but we do it all the time. And, just to put things in perspective, it's 11:36 p.m. as I'm starting this live stream. And good Lord, let me seriously tell you that, man, I've done probably 12 hours of calls today, individual, group. Man, like men in my groups win. And it's consistent, it's regular. There's also losses, but what we're trying to share with you here are the wins. So let me just dive right into this live stream and make sure everything's up and running and good to go. And then we'll get started with the fancy presentation. Tonight, we'll do glasses off. How about that, man? We're not messing around. All right? Get the party started. If you're watching on TikTok, hey guys, thank you so much. I hope you get a ton out of this. If you're not on my email list, I would really get on my email list. It'll give you a ton of free stuff on family court. If you're suffering through the system and you think that this is just like some scam where I get your email address and then I like rub my evil hands together and then, screw you over in some way, that's not true. You just get a ton of free content that is going to help you navigate through what many people call an impossible system. So let's get into this. I plan on being up pretty late tonight. How about you guys? All right. So, what makes somebody win in family court? What makes somebody win in an impossible system? The system, yes, that is corrupt, unjust, not fair. It's bias. It screws you over. It tears people apart. It's a business. Follow the money, all the different things that we talk about. But what makes somebody win? And because I only work with people in extremely high conflict cases, in fact, I took on a client today that said, my case is really extreme, Steve. I want to talk to you. And as soon as he came on my calls, he says, geez, I didn't know it could be this bad. That's where almost every single person in my group starts in. A person that thinks their case is harder than anybody else's. I haven't heard it. It's that extreme. And then when they come to my groups, they hear from a group of guys that is way worse than they could ever imagine, and men who have won in that. Okay. And I want to be clear because people also lose. There's no guarantees. This is only stories that come from the only group I know that is the largest, the longest running, almost 20 years, and has the most amount of people that have won in only high conflict. But your case is different. I get it's different. So we're sharing with you that information, or I'm sharing with you the information of carrying that for so many years. So you don't lose family court because it's unfair. You lose because you don't understand it. And this is like, what the hell am I saying? Why would I ever believe anybody in that? And I just told you, all I hear are super high conflict cases. All I work with is that. All my group is made up of that. How can I say that? Well, I didn't say that the system was fair. I'm agreeing with you. It's unfair, but that's not why you're losing. And this is probably one of the most important things that you need to get. you need to listen to this. And I'm telling you, I'm trying to share this message that I've been carrying for all this time, and there's so much resistance for it. You lose because you don't understand how it works. And you're not going to understand how it works from just your case. Okay, so your 1 or 10 losses is nothing compared to the 10 losses I see every week, the hundreds that I see every year, and you don't see the wins and what works. And you need to see those things. In fact, I just want to tell you that things like false allegations, things like parental alienation, things like where we're starting out in this, they're almost never discussed. And the road to winning them is going to take so much more of you than you could ever imagine. Okay. So imagine that family court is like this crazy maze, and there's an infinite ways to lose. There's actually not, but let's say there's like 10 or 15, it's probably like 10 common ways where you're going to lose. Okay. And in that maze, it could be, all right, you got the wrong GAL, the wrong guardian ad litem. Okay. The wrong witnesses. Your ex is a narcissist. Maybe she beat you to the punch. She blindsided you with it. Maybe it's that she's a liar, or actually this video was inspired by my work done privately with a woman who's asking for preparation for her upcoming trial. Maybe there's all these things that happen in family court that move in these crazy, crazy tentacles. And each one of those tentacles seems impossible because you can't wind your way back to the center to get to any point that's good. But what's happened in my groups is in every single one of those tentacles, somebody has found a way to win back. What's even more important about that is in all of these different common ways that everybody loses that are so confusing, that are mired down by tons of people online just saying that it's a tragedy and it's horrible and all this sort of stuff, which is true, right? Not only do I have men that have won in that way, but they've taught other men to win in that way. Okay, in a different state, in a different county, oftentimes a different country. So again, no guarantees, but in this impossible system with these 10 to, on the max side, 15 ways where people can lose that are just all chaotic and crazy, we've had a guy win. But not only that, he's worked with other guys that have had the same, like, dead end of the maze win as well. That's important. That's really important. Okay. So there's no guarantees. Sadly, very few people produce content on these high conflict situations. Sadly, very few people talk about how to beat false allegations, how to really have a courtroom strategy to defeat somebody who has NPD. But that's what we're trying to share. Okay. Now, that being said, what's going to be covered in this? This is how crazily thorough this is. We're going to go over the myth of this. We're going to cover the laws. We're going to cover the rule to the laws, studying what wins, evidence, and then preparation of that evidence. That's a lot of stuff. And we have to start there. We have to start at the beginning because, again, if we think we lose family court because it's unfair, the judges suck, it's expensive, it's a business, all the things we hear about every day, you're already setting yourself up to lose because you're going to give up when you hit one of those dead ends of the maze. And this is really the main thing. Men give up in family court too early, all the time. Men and women. Again, as I said, this is inspired from my work with a woman. And man, she's doing some badass stuff. We got to talk tomorrow. Can't wait for it. She's in many ways an ideal client. Okay. So let's get into this. All right. Where do we start? We're going to start with the myth of the broken courtroom. So most dads lose before they ever start. And you don't lose because the courts aren't fair. You lose because you don't know how it works. You don't understand it. And then you go, man, I'm never going to listen to this guy because he's not relating with me. Okay, which is not true. The simple fact of the matter is I have so much experience with working with people exactly like you that I'm telling you the truth, how we know it in my groups, what we've seen work over and over again. Okay, so look, everything that made you succeed in anything that's made you successful is not going to work the same in family court. Okay, just let's start right there. And if you've never won anything in your life and you're willing to listen and do some of the things that are suggested here, you have way more of a chance of winning than anybody who's been traditionally successful. So if you've never been traditionally successful and you're open, you have a way better chance of getting good results in high conflict custody. Okay. If you're used to winning, you're used to being really smart, you're used to studying, you built the most complex strategy for things that have never been figured out in the world before, and everybody worships you, whatever that is, right? You have a high probability to lose in family court. And part of this is because you're used to winning in a certain way that's going to get you censured. So you're going to get in trouble in family court. Like you're going to piss off a judge. You're going to go against the grain. You expect fairness to work or lead the way, right? And remember, we said family court is unfair. And it's not its unfairness that makes you lose. It's your relationship with that unfairness that makes you lose. Okay. Because then you quit and you go, man, nothing works. And it's pretty easy to get caught up with complaining about it. Okay. And whatever makes you win at something within sports, or what you see win in wars, which is equally insanely chaotic, it's just not going to make that translation. So I need you to be open-minded and look at the things that I'm talking about. And I'd even say, like, if you have a clean slate, like you've always lost, you're just like, man, well, I'll try this. This is your best chance. If you haven't always lost and you've won, but you're going like, well, I'm going to be open-minded in the best possible way. The losing, the unfairness, the blockades, those things are just going to screw you up. And let me just start this off with a story. There's a guy who came to my groups yesterday, or maybe a couple days ago, he signed up. And today was his first call, and he was talking about a loss that was actually with, I believe, a GAL. No, therapist. And it was crazy because, like, he's a guy that has actually done quite well in his case. He's in a good spot. But this is often what happens. Like, you involve a GAL, a therapist, a third party, and the other party complains about them and they cut them out, right? So they cut them out. You're already, you've been in your case for a long time. You've burned through a ton of money. You've realized that the court system is unfair. All these things that are super common. And then you get screwed over by the system. A manipulator manipulates the system once again, and they get it. And this is like the 50th time that it's happened to them. In fact, this guy, he said he had been in court 29 times. So 29 hearings or trials or whatever, a mix of these things that he's been in. That's crazy, right? Well, there was another guy on the call who had the exact same thing happen, who's been in the group for a little bit over a year. And he is dominating in his case. Dominating. In the last week, we've been talking about this exact situation. The exact situation, right? The unfairness of what happened. This dude is dominating. He started out with criminal charges. He started out with a protective order. He couldn't see his child. He could not see his child. He has 50-50 now. He's going for full. Okay? So in less than a year, he was able to get 50-50 custody, starting out from a criminal charges of abuse that turned out to be unfounded. So that's a double whammy. He's got to win the criminal case. Okay? It's got to get dismissed there. But then the family court side of the protective orders and so on also have to be dismissed. It was very, very difficult. So this guy's got 50-50, wants to get full. In that, there were some issues with third parties. Same thing happened. The other party manipulated the situation like they always do, made things extremely unfair, and got one of those third parties cut out of the case. And you want to give up, you want to quit. But this guy's been in the group so long, he's seen people win, he's seen people lose, he's seen good men who do the right things even lose, right? Because it's so hard, it's that hard, that he goes, man, I need to be more and more on the winner's lane. I need to study what is truly making people lose, what is truly making people win, and I need to stay on track when it's impossible to think through this. And this is why the group is so important, okay? This is why that community thing is so, so freaking important. So when we think about it, you might be watching this going, I'd kill for 50-50. Man, I would do anything for that, right? This guy who I'm describing, who has 50-50, there were lots of losses, there were lots of unfairness, and he had to go through it. And that's really hard to take a guy through. That is really, really, really difficult. That's the mentality you need to have. He probably dealt with more unfairness than the average man in this and wanted to give up. In fact, probably did give up, but guys in the group carried him through, or myself, and those types of things. And he's able to get to a good spot. Okay, so it's not just perseverance. It's not just what made you win the high school basketball thing. It's not what made you become a world champion. Okay, it is being able to step back, get strategy, not be emotional about it. Look at what works. Study family court, not study how you won, the whatever grand prize that made you think you're so good at these things. And that's what guys do. Okay, so real important. Many people give up during all that. Let me look back at my notes. So the courtroom does not care about morality. It doesn't care about your virtue. It doesn't care about what you think about it. It doesn't care about how you gossip online. It deals with procedure and perception. In fact, everybody says it cares about money. Let's take away the money, right? Great argument. I'm glad you watched the movie that said that line and you compared it back and forth, but they probably don't really care about that. Like a judge isn't thinking, like there's a process to take away the court's money that isn't going to be those things, right? If you define the wrong enemy, you're going to not win the fight you need to fight. Okay? When you say family court sucks, you remove your ability to study it, to be motivated to understand what you might have even done wrong, and you could be saying what sucks is in the complete wrong direction. So for instance, they cut out a third party in the example that I just gave, which is a tremendous witness for them. They were able to manipulate it. And we go, man, the judge or whatever, or sometimes the opposing counsel harasses the third party so much that the third party has to recuse themselves, right? So it's not safe for them to continue, or they're manipulated in some way to change their testimony. These things happen all the time. They're pretty common. It's totally screwed up. So we go, man, the system is broken. It sucks. You are right. But now you have no way, no direction to fight your fight to get your son or daughter or sons or daughters. Okay, so this is really important to understand. The man who studies the system always beats the man who complains about it. Okay, so I get it that a great philosopher or some poet made a line that says, if you're within the system, you lose. That could be true, but if you want to win your battle, don't get caught up in that trap. You're going to need to win within the system, okay? So you're going to have more reasons to quit in this than you could ever imagine. I'm not being dramatic with that. So the longer you go in this, you'll have these good days, these huge reliefs. You'll have a lot of bad days. You cannot comprehend it. You can do it. All right. That's probably one of the most important lessons about this is that you can make this work, but you have to be really, really strong about it. It is huge. Okay. So let's start with the root of all of this and study the law itself. What is the law? What do judges actually want in family court? Okay, how do we understand this crazy thing? And just before we get you guys who say you've studied the law, because there's a lot of you guys, right? You've studied the law. First off, we're only going to talk about family law in your state and county. We're not talking about Constitution. Okay, that's important. That's really, really important. But we have to start in one place. And just because you may understand, let's say, the Texas Family Code, almost always flag this in your head. Just go, man, this is the humble part. This is when I was describing the guy who has not won anything in his life. And it's just like, well, I'm just going to step forward and kind of follow these loose directions and see where I go. And that's the most probable guy to win. Here's the thing. Whether you understand the law or not, or let's say if you understand the law, it only matters if you see how it's applied. So we also have to learn how that law is applied. So we got to start with the law. You're not trying to prove truth. You're trying to prove relevance under the law. Okay, so we're not trying to prove our emotional story. We're not trying to prove what we're pissed off about. We're not trying to prove her lie. We're trying to prove what matters to the court through its laws. So what do? We have some homework that we have to do. So if you're watching this, what you need to do is you need to look up the statutes that define this whole battlefield. Okay, so an example of this is in Texas, chapter 153 of the Family Code defines custody decisions. Okay, it's going to list specific factors that have to do with what is it? The best interest of the child, the stability, the safety of parental involvement. Okay, so those are just words, right? But what we have to look at is any piece of evidence, any argument that we have. She is a narcissist. She is somebody that doesn't take the kids to school. She's somebody that drinks too much. It needs to somehow have some evidence towards it, all right, that matters in the court. We're going to talk about this a lot tonight, okay, that matters in how in the court it is argued. So that means before your case, there's probably somebody with the exact same case. In fact, this week in your court, there's probably somebody with the exact same case as yours, very similar, okay? And if you really want to be thorough, give it a month, and man, it's going to be there. And they're going to have to argue it, and they're going to argue it in either a right or a wrong way. And you can oftentimes watch that. Now, if you open it up to multiple states and counties, it matters most about your judge. But if you really want to go for it and look at California courts or Texas courts or Washington courts and study those courtrooms, you're definitely going to see cases a lot like yours. And what you need to look at is how is it that they talk about this tricky family code of what's the best interest of the child, and how do we argue it using all the stuff that you have, that she's a narcissist. Okay, what didn't work 10 times in that? In the one time it did work, how did it work? That's what we want to look at. Okay, so we need to understand the statutes, and then we need to look at how they're argued. Okay, so everybody who's watching this, like when it comes down to evidence and courtroom procedure, I get comments quite a bit on, dude, just show me the how to organize evidence. Why can't you show me that? Well, first off, I don't need to do anything. I can run a business and get plenty of clients without making free videos for you. But so many of the guys in my groups will tell me, including why I even started in the first place, is like, please get more information out to people. All right. Like that's really important for all of us. So let's not be too mean to me. I'm the only person really doing this. Maybe there's more, and I hope there's more. And maybe after your case, you do more for it. Okay. So within that, I can't tell you a way to learn the application of family law that you can sit at your computer and learn. Okay? I can't. Nobody can. You have to get your hands dirty. More than likely, you're going to have to go down to the county clerk's office and understand the process and procedure. More than likely, you're going to have to watch family court. You're going to have to go to your case. And the first time entering the courtroom should not be for your case. You need to enter into the courtroom multiple times. It's really, really important, okay? So I can tell you where to look up the laws. I can tell you to look up case law. This is like what I hear a lot of people say. Case law, man, da-da-da. Okay, good. I'm glad it worked out for you that you could just read it and then you could walk into court and be effortless and make it work. It's going to be really difficult for you to apply it, okay? So procedure is also going to define how you fight. So the statutes and the laws, these are really important. You have to understand them. Then you have to learn the procedure, okay? It's going to show you the way you fight, the cadence, the order of things, all those different things of how you're going to make your argument. Okay, so this could be the rules of evidence. You have to validate your evidence. What does that mean? Okay, I can't define that. Nobody's helping me. The county clerk's an asshole. I'm not watching an easy to follow YouTube video on this because it kind of can't be made, at least at this moment. So I'm going to quit. No, you have to keep going. Okay, what is civil procedure? You have to look at all these things and learn them. And I'll tell you this, so many of these things I don't know, and I say this all the time, but I care a lot about my clients. And so I go, okay, I'm going to try and learn. I'm going to ask somebody Maybe if you're unwilling and you're working with me, and it's a big commitment, and you're unwilling or you're too fried or you can't think, you can't hire a lawyer to talk to him, I'll hire a lawyer to figure out what that is. And this is how I learn. Okay. I was not made for this. I didn't ever want to do this job. Seriously. Like I didn't, like who wants to say, I didn't point out and go, man, I'm going to find the niche of the thing that nobody can figure out. And the highest conflict, crazy, insane stuff, and look through the worst abuse cases. Like this was not my intention. Somehow I was just willing to do it. But how I did it was I asked for help and I looked for things. You're going to have to do that. Now, I talk about this a lot in that your brain might be too fried. That's normal. This is why we get a group and people around us. Okay. So judicial discretion is the wild card. Okay. This is crazy. This is one of the things which makes family court so unfair. One moment. This is the seasonal cranberry rambler that is made here in Austin, Texas. It's pretty good, actually. I wish they sold bigger cases that weren't just like 8 or something. But anyway, okay, so you got to understand that family court is different than any other court. Why? Because it's unfair, it's evil, it's corrupt, and politicians made a money engine for you. Possibly, but then if you say that, you can't figure out a way to beat it. You're looking at the wrong thing that's going to help you win it. Okay, so one of the things that makes it so infuriating is the judicial discretion. Why is there judicial discretion? Meaning a judge can decide what they want. They can go against the Constitution, right? Now, they're not sitting there going, I'm going to go against the Constitution. But the reason why they have so many options to choose is because laws are really hard to define. Remember the first part, those statutes, they're really hard to define things, okay? Because there's all these different variables. Because what gets decided in a family court? So perhaps there's money issues. Perhaps there's real estate. Perhaps there's investments. Perhaps there's a company you guys started together. Perhaps there's kids. Perhaps there's kids with disabilities. Perhaps you have a disability and the child doesn't, but that affects things. There's so many different variables to the law that everything gets thrown all over the place. Now, also, those statutes aren't black and white for so many things that are common in family law. This is crazy. So this is screwed up. So for instance, let's go through something where a judge needs to make a decision. And this one happens all the time with false allegations. So if you're going through false allegations, I want you to understand this. Happened today in our groups, happens many, many times. And it actually happened in a conversation with somebody who's incarcerated right now that I had today as well. So this is how common it is. Somebody makes false allegations. They say that you beat them, okay? So if a woman makes that about a man, it gets taken very seriously. There's all sorts of horrible reasons for that, which I talk about and I'm very passionate about. I think it's totally screwed up. Let's say it's the opposite, right? And a man says he's beaten by a woman and makes it up. Either one is bad. But our courts are trained, and for some good reasons that are screwed up, to protect women and kids. Okay, so there's good reasons for this, but they get it wrong. Okay, we have to understand that. If we don't understand that, we create a bigger error. Okay, so this happens all the time. A guy gets false allegations, and the police come down on him. There's a protective order put in place, maybe a domestic violence restraining order put in place, and it just screws everything up in your family law case. Everything stops, and you have to defend that. And it's not only in family court, it's in criminal court. And both courts are separate. Okay, so you got to do the criminal court thing, then you got to do the family law thing. And in family law, the judge is not a criminal court judge. That judge is also not a business judge. They're not dealing with all the different things that they get thrown at them. They don't know real estate law. They don't understand business. They know a little bit about a lot of different things. So they have to have discretion in it. So in family court, they have to make a ruling in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe they have an hour to hear your case. Now, if you come in with a crappy attorney, which is number one thing that we see go wrong in this, you come in with evidence that is disorganized, it's a bunch of screenshots, it doesn't follow a narrative, you don't even understand what you're arguing, you just think you want to say that she's a liar and don't want to prove that this false abuse didn't happen. That's the main thing you have to do. You have to have an attorney that knows the procedure. If you have an attorney, if you're representing yourself, you need to really know this procedure. So you get it all wrong and you only have 15 minutes in front of that judge. Like, that's the norm. You're going to have 15 minutes. An hour or more is kind of like, that's a lot. So you don't get to explain yourself. Now, in this, because you don't go first, because you're the defendant in it, your ex is there as the main witness and she starts screaming and crying. So you think this works, okay? And maybe it's working. Maybe there's a bias there, right? But instead, you then go, this is ridiculous, or you say, shut up, or she's lying, or you start screaming and crying. Two people screaming and crying, not following the process, makes the court then go, man, stop. We're going to err on the side of caution because I have the discretion to do that. And we're going to make the protective order permanent or restraining order longer or whatever. If you follow any form of disorder because you didn't know the process, you didn't do things right, whether you didn't hire the right lawyer or you didn't know the process yourself, whatever, it's really easy for that to go wrong. That's because you didn't know. We know that. And yes, there are still losses in our group, but we don't have the losses due to you being ignorant. Okay. Most men lose because they're ignorant to this situation. But here's the discretion part that gets even more crazy. Okay. I may be spending a little bit too long on this, but man, if you've been here, you know how vitally important this is. So then you go through, let's say the judge says, we're going to do a temporary protective order or temporary domestic violence protective order. And we're going to allow 3 months. And here's what I want done. So then a third party gets involved. These are all good things that you need. That third party, just like the judge, is trained only to protect women and kids and maybe men, but not false allegations. They're not trained on false allegations. Okay. Nobody's trained on false allegations. In fact, I want to do a whole video series that's an open letter to CPS, DCFS, judges, social workers, all these sorts of things, because they get this wrong so much. So here's what happens. Then the therapist, the GAL, the CPS, DCFS officer, they come and do interviews. And in it, the interview's all over the place. Okay, so you're pissed off, you try and make your point, and you say that she's lying and keeping you from the kids. The mom gets interviewed, and she says he's lying, whatever, doesn't produce evidence, and then she retracts it, whatever, goes all over the place. And then the kids are confused, and they're afraid of dad, okay? Probably because of parental alienation, probably because they've been programmed to do that. And then the officer, let's say it's a CPS officer, Child Protective Services, comes back and talks to you. Now, they shouldn't share what's been shared with other people, but somehow they always do this. I don't get it, man. They need to be trained better, straight up. And usually CPS officers or workers think very highly of themselves in their training, which for some of it, it's probably really good. And for some cases, it's really good. For like some of these high level of abuse cases, it's really good. When you get a win in that, it makes you feel really good about it. But they're not trained to deal with false allegations. Nobody is. This is really screwed up. So you say, in this situation, this is a situation that's common, is the mom then retracts the situation. The person who made the false allegations says it didn't happen. And the social worker involved then says that's a trait of abuse, because it is. So for real, that is a trait of what an abused person does. They blame themselves, they retract it, and they take a step back. But you're saying, but it's fake. And that's what is happening here. And you get really angry about it, which you probably should. You shouldn't, because it's going to screw up your interview, which to somebody's report, that's really important. But you think like, oh my God, man, like this is ridiculous. So you shouldn't get mad, right? You bring that to the groups or whatever. And then it goes to the judge. And the judge hears all of this. And they're not trained either. And they go, man, that is true. In many studies that have been shown that if somebody's abused, they can retract it. And then there's different stories. The kid tells a different story because they can't remember something properly. And abuse works in that way. And there's many studies on that. And then the mom retracts it and says, you know what? I want to drop the charges. I don't want to witness in this. They don't have the power to drop the charges, but they're not going to be a witness, and they're going to keep the child from being a witness. Okay. But the CPS officer thinks they should err on the side of caution due to their training, and the judge agrees, and you are screwed. So that sounds like it's unfair. So the logical option in this is the whole system is screwed, right? It's totally screwed. It needs to be redone, and let's tear it down. I want my rights. Okay, that makes perfect sense for you, but it's not taking into account what real abuse is. And you're not giving a solution that the state would ever say yes to, unless maybe there was some crazy radical overthrow, which I don't want, because it doesn't give any answer to the people really being abused, where this does happen, why those laws were formed. Okay. Then we have a bunch of people that say, okay, those laws that were made are BS. They're not. So let's take a step back and go to what real, because every man who goes through this says he's really logical, he's really smart, okay, he believes in science, and I'm thorough, and these people suck, so F them. We should win, we should be angry and rewrite it, and then they yell at me. Okay, this is not smart, this is not logical, and it's not scientific. It's not the process, and anything that involves intelligence and higher thoughts and seeing a lot of these things. Remember I think I said it, I meant to say it. If I didn't, you've seen 1 to 10 losses, your losses. And I see 10 losses every week. And I see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of losses throughout the year and wins. And so in that, I can see a lot more. And I've worked with people who've really been abused. It's horrible. And you can see a lot more. So the problem here is nobody's looking at what is right and wrong. And you can easily see this. And the judges, CPS, social workers need to be trained on this, and they're not. And they also get mad when I tell them this. So let's go through this really quick, okay? Somebody makes false abuse accusations. They do a couple things that real abused people never do. Okay, why does this never get discussed? Because social workers, judges, whatever, they can never really prove false allegations, but when they suspect things are false, they see it like 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 100. It's rare. It's not all the time. And it's random. Okay, I only see this, or I see a lot of it. Okay, and they don't want to make a mistake on it, so they're not trained well. So somebody that makes false allegations, they do a couple things that are unique. Okay. Number one, they brag about it. Number one, they want to attack you and defame you. They hate you. They are obsessed with convincing everybody else, including the kids, around this narrative. Okay. And they're not shy. They're not timid. They're not dismissive. And their reasons for flipping or making things problematic for different workers, or flipping and saying, you know what, I'm not going to testify, which is also common, is very different. They want to be rewarded for it. This all it's clear as a bell to me. And I used to think, why don't people study this? Which I still think that, but I couldn't see why until I worked with more social workers and CPS workers. Somebody who's really abused does not make it their life goal to be famous for it on social media. Their life goal as being a celebrity victim, as well as you being taken down as evil. They're usually shy about it. They're quiet about it. They don't understand that it's fully abuse. And if they do flip or switch, they're going to do it out of guilt and remorse. and they're not going to want to be rewarded for it. They're going to feel bad about it. Okay. And with their kids, they're going to move further into, there's so many different things with this, but interfamilial dysfunction. Well, it's all interfamilial dysfunction, but they're going to move into a quieter, secretive dysfunction with their child. They may blame their child. They may get mad at their child for it. They may keep it a secret. But those behaviors are night and day different. And if we were able to combine in the family court system what forensic psych evals do, okay, and look at those with false accusation cases, and we combine that with training CPS, DCFS, Friends of the Court, all these different people, guardian ad litems, all these different things, child lawyers. If we combine that together and also with judges, and we were able to show them, then we might have a solution. That would be the real solution to it. And then that would help protect real abused kids and protect people that were being falsely accused of abuse and not exploited. And if we were really smart, because we realize this is a real damaging problem that has affected many men and also women, then we would go, you know what? How about if something's wrong with this, we take responsibility for it and allow a protocol of change where everybody could communicate. This is not what's happening. And so when men go through this and they get all into men's rights and they get all pissed off and they say we need to change the laws and do whatever, they're like, there's not a solution happening. So this is why it's real important to build at least like a group that finds a solution in this. Okay. When you commit to a solution and you become responsible, right? Or take on some responsibility, some ownership of your role in helping other people, you actually find out what you use as an excuse all the time is the truth. You find out what actually works, okay? And you see what the real problem is and not just learn how to win an internet battle and talk a bunch of trash. That was a really long explanation, but I feel that that explanation is something that you guys need to understand and get with family law, or else you're going to go in a gigantic circle of extreme loss. Okay? So let's go to that. You got homework, people. You need to study your family courts and you need to watch family courts. You need to see what evidence works and you need to look at how to build a narrative of that evidence. Which brings us to this next thing. How do we watch family court? So I bring up watching family court a lot, but you can't learn to win in family court by reading. You can't win in family court by studying how you've won anything else before, okay? But you can learn it by watching. You can really learn it by watching. You can visit an open docket. You can sit quietly as an observer. You can watch 5 hearings. I think you should watch more, okay? You can notice things. Like you could have a little checklist with you. In fact, you could watch this on Zoom. And you could say, who speaks first? What order do they speak in? Is it the plaintiff? Is it the defendant? Is it the person who filed first? What's this hearing for? Okay. How do objections get handled? How are they made? How do they get brought up? Okay. How does the judge respond to the tone of somebody? How do they respond at the beginning of the docket? So at the very beginning of the day, how do they respond after a hard day? Okay. What's a common barrier that's found? Okay. So some common barriers could be like a continuance, canceled hearings. There could be clerks that are not helpful and having a bad day or just a bad person. Okay. What happens when you keep going to family court and what lawyers do you see regularly? What lawyers win? What lawyers lose? What lawyers let down their clients? How do the different tragedies happen and so on? All of those different things. What are the patterns of things happening in family court? Okay. Do you see parents that are calm? Do you see attorneys that are calm? Do you see attorneys argue something factual in a straight line? Do you see a certain repetition of credibility? So for instance, like maybe it's your first time going to family court, but you see somebody that the judge recognizes. Oh, yeah, I remember this case. 3 months ago, we did this, this, and that. Did you do that? Is there some sort of credibility being earned? Because usually those things, like when you have to come back after 3 months and something's being revisited, it probably wasn't always nice that day. Like those parents that are going to family court that are calm probably weren't their first time. If they were, awesome. That's what I want you to be. Okay. So when things get emotional, how does it escalate to being dismissed? Right. So when people start arguing, what happens? Okay. These things you really need to look at. So every man needs to spend a couple of days watching strangers in family court, whether that's on Zoom or in person. And one day in family court of observing and watching is worth more than 1 year of going on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and complaining. So one day is going to teach you so much more than anything you could ever get, even from a lifetime of talking trash on the system and signing petitions that don't go anywhere. Now, I want a petition to go somewhere, but sadly, they usually don't. So we've got to move forward in things, and it starts with winning your case. So once you can understand the system, when you can understand the laws, when you've watched family court, when you've done those things, then you are kind of prepared to start working on your case. And that is the evidence. Okay. So how do we tell the story of evidence? What is the narrative of evidence? So evidence is a story. It's not something you dump on the court for the court to figure out. This is hard because many of you guys hire lawyers, and in the hiring of your attorneys, you expect them to figure it all out. Well, some do, rarely, most don't. So good attorneys, really good attorneys, and really bad attorneys do the same thing of not figuring out your evidence for you. They might explain it to you, all right? But more than likely, you probably need to talk with a group like mine or something and understand those things, or watch my videos. Like my group is like, please, what can we do for free to help people out? Okay. Like there's not many people that can afford this. There's not many people that can, whether it's the $75 a month or the $400 buy-in for a bigger group at the time of recording all this, like guys may not be able to afford that. I'm just going to tell you the level of service that you get for $75 a month is a lot. But I get that you can't, like man, you're made broke by this system. You weren't expecting this. You weren't saving up to throw away $20,000 to $50,000 on a family law case. Nobody does that. Nobody has that. One thing that family law proves is everybody who says they're rich, oh man, family law will show you you're probably not. And if you are, it's going to hurt, right? So, all right, we have to start looking at how evidence moves into a story. What is it? So most guys come out of order. They go, I have all this evidence that she sucks, and that makes sense in family law, right? She lied, or whatever it is. So we have this idea of how evidence is supposed to work. But if we did the first two things, right? What were the first two things? Learn the laws, start studying how they're applied, and then we go in and watch family court to see how it works. We study it, okay? And we also do that other thing of not being reactive and just saying, like, when we hit those tentacle walls, when we hit the dead-end barriers of the maze of family law, we listen to, at least what I'm saying, is that for every single one of those common dead ends, and there's a lot of them, we've had guys win from that and teach other men to win from that. So you need to learn how to win from that, okay? So in all of that, we want to understand what I will call a funnel of evidence. Okay, so what's a funnel of evidence? There's a claim, there's the relevance to that claim, there's the proof of that claim, and then there's the impact of that. Okay. So, for instance, it could be like, this violates the order. That's what makes it relevant. So, what's the claim? They, wouldn't let us certain visitation times. Okay. So, where do we have the proof of that? How does the court care that that is proven? And then how would that impact whatever statutes, right? So generally the best interest of the child, but how would that move in? Where have other people argued this and you're watching a family court? So we have a claim, right? How is it relevant? Where's the proof? And how does this impact the statutes? Everything needs to follow that, okay? A lot of this, so one of the things that we find in going through this with different guys is most evidence is not relevant, or it was gotten in some way that would be inadmissible, right? So it's like maybe you shared a computer and her email address is open on it or whatever, but she never meant for that to happen. She just didn't care for a long time because you were sharing the same computer and you weren't in a high conflict case, but it remains there. And then you see some stuff you shouldn't see. You can't use that. Okay. There's a lot of that. There's also a lot of stuff that might be like, she's, wishing death upon me or something, or saying like, you can never see the kids. I'm going to make sure that you never see the kids. Okay. We would go, man, that's parental alienation. Well, if you watched my parental alienation live stream, which I want to do again and clean up, and I actually ran through the entire transcript of that through AI, and I'm working on new ways to make that more teachable. But I think I already told you this. I started at 10 a.m. this morning. It's 12:26, and there were 3 hours I wasn't working that were all with my kids. So I've almost been doing 12 hours today of work on this. It's difficult, so the live streams are easy. But if we watch that parental alienation, those text messages aren't going to be enough. They don't have the relevance. They're proof of what, right? There's no statute as well that they're empowering. So we have to look at, okay, how is this affecting the child? How does that work? And it can, right? So if you have text messages like that, you have to argue them in the right way. Most people are arguing them in the wrong way. So I'll give you an example of if it's like, I hope you should die and you never see the kids, and I never want you to see the kids again. And you say, that's parental alienation. I watched 5 YouTube videos on it, and judge, you should care. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? Okay, there's no statute for that. And you're now telling me how to do my job. You're insinuating that I don't know the law when you don't even know the process of my courtroom. Like, F you, get out of here. It's probably not going to make them happy. So we have to say is like, okay, could this be an argument for instability? Okay, if it is, it's a lower argument, but that's still important. Okay, is this an argument that the kids are aware of? How do we prove that? Do we need third parties to give that relevance? Okay, and then this proof now has a different narrative to tell. Like, those are the things that we need. So it's kind of crappy because these things that always happen in family court that the courts are sick of hearing about because they're presented wrong, because we don't understand the law and we're telling a judge that they don't understand the law, which is not the thing. You don't want to piss off the judge, right? Don't, unless it really has to be done, right? So we're going in with that. The courts are polluted with this thing that we're trying to make a point with. We got to make that point good. We have to get the process of that right. And that's the hard part. Okay. So when we're looking at evidence, that's really important. So when guys comment like something really demanding to me, maybe swearing, maybe wishing a bad thing upon me, like your ex is doing, and saying, just show me how to do this. This is the part where I need to link to this part of the video because it's so difficult. Like, you probably don't understand how the courts work. You haven't watched family court. You're not understanding the meaning of your evidence, and you think you know the laws when you don't. And so you've kind of like, well, this says the best interest of the child, and she's saying I should die. That's not in the best interest of the child. Okay, that makes sense to you and me, but how does it happen with that court? So this is really important. You have to understand the courts in general, and then your judge. The first time walking into family court should not be for your case. That should be the 100th time walking into family court, but more realistically, the 10th or 15th time. The first time seeing your judge should not be in your case. Sometimes that's the only option because you can't watch your judge. But you should at least understand judges. And, like somebody said to me today, they have a judge. Man, I did a lot of calls today. Somebody said to me today that their judge they were a man and dealing with man stuff. And they said, look, I'm really afraid because the judge is a female and is known for being really liberal and hard about stuff that I'm being falsely accused of. Okay. So I'm actually not trying to make anything political here by any means. Like, that's not the goal. My goal is just to help you win. That's the goal. Okay. So it doesn't really have to do with any of that. And that's what I told him. I said, look, man, okay, that sucks. You have a judge that we don't know yet, may have some biases towards people like you and your case. Okay. That can happen. We need to understand that, right? This is why we don't go to court dressed like how I'm dressed now, right? Okay. So we don't go to court like that. We clean up, we look good so that we want to have the best possible presentation and override any sort of biases, right? So we can't just go in like blindly. But if we think that they're biased and we have no chance, then we give up. We stop looking for ways. I can guarantee you the most biased judge is going to rule on a case in your favor in her career, their career, his career, whoever's career. Okay. So that's going to happen. It's probably going to happen more than you think. Okay. And if we're going to change anything, if people are biased, everybody's biased. Okay. It's our job to change their minds if we want to. With your judge, that's a job. Okay. So with some random person on the street and they go like, look at this guy, I don't care. Or if it's somebody commenting on my YouTube video saying, you MF, just show me how to do evidence. Like, I don't care. Actually, I am kind of hurt by that. I really would want to help you. Right. And I'm trying to with this. So you have to start understanding, look at my courtroom, look at my case. How does this judge determine that? And like I was saying before, there's not that big of a variation to judges. There's men, there's women, there's ones that lean this way, there's ones that lean that way. Watch a couple of them, you're going to get it. And then you figure out your game plan of what to do. Okay. And that's the best shot you got. That's the best thing, the best starting place for you. All right. Very, very important. Even though that doesn't slam dunk it, that's not a guarantee. That doesn't make things ultimately fair. That doesn't make all the things that you're saying are so important for you, why the court system is so screwed up. That's where you start, man. And if that's where you're at, awesome. Let's go forward. Okay. Stop thinking you're trapped. You think you're trapped, you're screwed. So evidence also needs to tell a legal story. So what the hell is that? We oftentimes want to say she's crazy because maybe she is. We're in high conflict, man. Everybody's crazy. But what you need to start saying is she violated a section of the order repeatedly that caused this harm. Remember? Claim, relevancy, proof, impact. She violated these things over and over again that causes harm to the child or my relationship to the child. Okay, now in that might be that she poured acid on your face or whatever, and the criminal courts didn't care, so it doesn't really get picked up by family court or whatever. Like, there could be all this harm, right? They are not going to care. The courts aren't going to care about your hurt feelings or whatever. They're going to care about the harm that has the narrative of why we made this law. So in that long rant, you should probably rewind and listen to the really long one that basically says, like, okay, real kids that are abused have these characteristics. And then CPS and DCFS says, we're not going to do this because of them. And then we're going to look at the false abuse and take on those traits, but nobody's looking at the whole picture. That rant, okay, whenever it happened. If you look at that, if we start thinking that we can tell a story of law, of what happened, of whatever, in a way that we think is right, we're never going to get it right. And and we're going to throw up our hands and we're going to quit. Okay. And a lot of these things I get are really, really difficult, and not too many people are looking at it. But what I did was I looked at my case, I looked at a ton of other people's cases, and I looked at both sides. Like I looked at a lot. Okay. So to understand how false abuse cases were, I started with that, and to see how they would be misinterpreted, I also had to look at real abuse cases. Like that's very kind of easy to think about the math on that. Seems logical, but not a lot of people make that, who insist on logic and science. And the smartest of people just think they look at their case and only their case, and then hear about a few other people's cases that they don't actually look at to make the conclusion that everything sucks and we need to stop. Okay. So we need to look at the evidence of that. So also avoid evidence dumps. So family court is about telling a legal story about a sequence of things, and not just here, it's all there, you're the court, figure it out. You need to explain it properly in a way that can be very, very difficult. Okay. Very, very difficult. So practice reframing pain into proof and the process of evidence. So what is pain? Pain is she lied. I can't see my kids. She's a horrible person, wishes bad things upon me. That's the pain part. And it's painful. And then a lot of people say, well, I'm not in pain. I'm emotionally stable. Dude, let's just get this straight. You're in a high conflict custody battle. You're in pain and you are not stable. That's cool. It's not because you're weak. That's because everybody is. Okay, so you got to understand that's your starting point, because if you don't, you're going to think it's like tying your shoelaces or taking a walk down the street. It's not that. Okay, it's a really, really hard thing where you're challenged in all these different ways. So your pain is going to go through. Your pain is going to come across, and that's not how things are argued. This is one of the biggest problems for pro se people. Okay, so I'm not emotional. I'm not in pain. Yeah, I've done hard things. Okay, look, great, great. Why are you asking me for advice? You just want to argue. Okay. So when it comes down to this, you're highly stressed. That means just by nature, you're not going to be thinking straight. That's not because you're a bad person. That's not because you peed your pants in the 5th grade and your mom helped cover it up. It's not any of that shame. All right. Just put all the childhood shame away. Okay. Of why you won the championship and get the gold medal so you can cover up whatever stuff. Family court is going to stress you out. It's going to make you not think straight. You're going to lead with your pain and you're going to lead with your emotions. So the whole reason why you're fighting is because of an emotional issue. Your kids are being taken away. So you need to understand that you need to check that. Okay. Now, here's another thing. Like I'm making a lot of this for a lady that I'm doing some work with and prepping for her trial. Okay. One of the things I'm telling her, lose your shit. It's all cool. Like, don't worry about it. You can be emotional as all hell. You can lose it, but you have to be able to say, Judge, I need a minute. You have to say, I forgot something. Can you give me a few seconds so I can remember? You have to be able to have a few catch things of when you get overwhelmed. So it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be angry, but how you show any of these things is really important in family court. So if you're a guy in this, it's going to be different. Okay. So if you're a woman and you get upset and you blurt something out, it's going to get you in trouble. It's not going to be favorable, but it might get overlooked. You don't ever want that to be something that is an option for a judge to take away your kids, right? Your emotional cracks, but it's going to happen. So if you're a woman and you get emotional, you say, I need a minute. I'm really angry. Can you just wait for a second? Okay. If you're a man, you say, Your Honor, I'm trying to respect your court. I need to take a few breaths because I'm emotional right now. You can say that. That's fine. It's when you say, I got it, and you're visibly angry and all of your tone is angry, and then you can't think straight and you're starting to think in the wrong direction and be pissed off at somebody. Like all that stuff shows through, and you don't want that. What you have to do is bring everything back to fact, which you probably, you're going to go, man, I'm really good at that, because everybody gets facts, right? But you're not in an emotional state. And then you got to go, how's that fact relevant? And almost as if you're emotionally detached from it. So yes, this is about your kids. Yes, this is unfair. Yes, you're getting screwed. Yes, there's nothing that works. Okay. And it's like, and it really sucks. And you're like a kid in a crib, temper tantruming, and nothing's fair. But you don't want to look at that image because you're never that, because you're a grown adult. These are things that come up in family court. It's all good. Like, it's cool. Man, it'll happen to me. Like, okay, does this make me any less of a human being? It's real common. I wish everybody else told me it was common. And then I got to go, okay, I'm emotionally escalated. How do I calm down? How to take a few breaths? Holy shit, I'm in court. Facts. Facts. What are the facts? What are the facts? Maybe I wrote them down. Okay, what are the facts? How is this relevant? Okay, what are the statutes that I'm trying to argue? What is this case about? In the top of your court summons, it will tell what it's about. It's not about, all the other stuff that you're thinking of why you're angry and all that sort of stuff. How is this relevant? Okay. So what you got to do for homework is not only just watch family court, but you should look at all of your evidence and run it through this funnel. Run it through this funnel. Okay. So remember, what's the claim? What's the relevance? Where's the proof? Where's the impact? Does it tell a legal story? Okay. How can I avoid the evidence dump of just chaotic crap that they're supposed to figure out? How can I practice putting it into a narrative and talk about it? Okay. How can I practice reframing all of the pain that I have and that's going to trigger me and turn it into proof? And then if we get really good at this, really good, and go on to the next thing, which is how do we behave in court, we can start to then look, okay, you know what? How is it that I'm going to be able to check all of my negative traits that pop up that I know I have, that I can ask my friends about of when I show anger, and how can I run that through my story of evidence? So when people say, I'll do anything for my kids, usually this is too much to ask, what I'm telling them. And I'm like, and I get it. I get it. You can watch, well, there's not many people making content on this. And I think that it's great. People are making content on it, but you can watch the person telling you the easier way to do it. And you go, man, it's easier. I love it. The stuff that Steve's telling me is ridiculous. The thing is I'm actually telling you what it's like to work long-term with guys. Sometimes it's 10 years on their cases. Okay. And probably if the years go even longer, it's going to be something like 20 years of all these weird, complicated things, and people go to jail and stuff. So the thing is that this is what happens in the long-term stuff of long-term results. So most people are talking about one-off experiences or a more detached lawyer perspective that's just working the case. And it's valuable. Like, more people should be talking about this stuff. But I'm telling you the hard stuff because that's all I deal with is the hard stuff in family court. Okay? So let's go into trial practice. So practicing what's going on in your case. Let's talk about the etiquette. And let's talk about witnesses. Okay, things that people talk about, like all the evidence stuff. I got this. Okay, do you really? If you watch family court, this is really difficult. And if you don't learn it, it's also going to completely F you. Okay, and by F you, it means like you're stuck into the doldrums of family court hell of no money, no kids, your spirit is broken, and you're left to say the world sucks because it kind of screwed you. But I don't want that to happen, so we have to do these other things. Okay, so let's have an open mind to the process of this, how to practice for your trial, how to talk to judges, and how witnesses work and all that sort of stuff. So the man that stays composed while attacked is the man that the judge is going to trust more. You're probably going to see this judge a lot of times, and you need to be calm. You need to not be emotional. Your first couple times, you might be. I'm trying to warn you against that. If that's happened, Kind of happens to everybody, but we want to prevent that. So we want to practice our entire case like it's game day, always. Everything is for preparing for trial. I get that you want to avoid this. This is one of the biggest arguments that I get with people. They go, well, this guy wants to go to trial. This attorney is a big trial attorney. Good. You want that. You want that because you always want the threat of trial. If you have an attorney that likes to settle, so settling's good. I want you to settle. Okay. But if you have an attorney that is willing to go to trial, you can never call their bluff. Okay. Because they're always ready to go. You have to be ready to go, or else there's going to be something where you're going to give up and be afraid of trial. You have to always prepare for trial. Okay. Whether that's pro se, whether it's a budget with an attorney, whatever. So everything needs to be rehearsed so that it can be a testimony out loud in court. If you have not gone to family court, if you've not studied the statutes, if you've not looked at your evidence, if you do not know your case, and you expect me to say a couple lines on a YouTube video or a TikTok video for you to get, and then the dude commenting again, one of the many that says, it sucks, just show me what works. That is not enough. You need to do all of this so that you can prepare your testimony, your rehearsals, your cross-examinations, you're being cross-examined, all these different things. You need to practice like it's game day, okay? Every point, every piece of evidence, everything that you have, you need to have 3 different points you're making, 3 different attacks, and you need to be prepared for 3 different counters. So if you say, she sent me this text message, well, we already used that example, but let's use another one. She lied to the therapist. She's not taking the kid to the therapist and and we agreed upon this and it's breaking of the court order. How would she argue that? Okay, here's a more, I was speaking local pidgin here in a second. I was going to say more better. If you're from Hawaii, you know. You know, it was the weirdest thing. For a short time in my life, I stayed in Trinidad, Tobago, and they speak a totally different form of pidgin that I cannot speak or imitate. So I thought I'd get it down from all the Hawaiian stuff, but hey, brada, shoots bra. Can't do it. Okay, so here's a real common one, all right? She has a diagnosis of being bipolar or whatever. Okay, she has a diagnosis. And let's say it's 5 years old and it's from a therapist. First off, how'd you get that information? If you got that information in the wrong way, it could be countered. Okay, so she wrote about it in her diary. How'd you get her diary? Okay, so now anything you got from her diary that leads you to go down a certain trail in that court, it could be made inadmissible, even though it might be true. Okay, that depends on the judge, depends on the lawyers and the way they argue it. So that's one way. But then let's say she got a diagnosis and you suspect this, so you properly, through the right procedure, subpoena the records of saying, okay, so you get that, and it's 3 years old or however long I said, and it says she's crazy, and like a clinical diagnosis of something important, like crazy. Okay, so first off, you can be crazy and argue for your property, your kids, for alimony, whatever. In fact, it might even be a bigger argument for spousal support or argument if they do have crazy. Okay, so you got to understand those counters. Okay, so what would this mean? So when we go into evidence, what relevance does it have? What's the proof? How do we get the proof? Okay, and then what is the result of this? So what does this mean? Okay, so if somebody's crazy, like let's use NPD because everybody talks about that, they're a narcissist. Okay, so how is that going to empower an argument? How does that mean that they're unfit as a parent or whatever? Which then you could do, okay? So that's really important. But because it's 3 years old, it could be argued, all right? So we got to think, how are they going to argue these things? Let's do another one really quick. So we were talking about this today with the therapist, and it's that if they have addiction issues, okay, addiction issues is something people should look at almost immediately if it's there. Okay. So if somebody's not an addict or an alcoholic, don't worry about it. And we're not trying to manufacture this. We're talking about if somebody really is. If somebody's acting crazy and they, you know, take trash and throw it at your house or slash your tires or whatever, okay, they're kind of crazy. This is inappropriate. File criminal charges, make some sort of complaints. Family court may not look at it. But if they test positive, if you get the evidence in the right way for some form of drug that is seen as bad by the courts, so generally this is going to be cocaine, heroin, MDMA, meth. Okay, so marijuana, maybe, maybe not. All right. Xanax, barbiturates, yes. Okay. Opiates of any sort, synthetics, all that stuff. Okay. Alcohol as well. What makes it an addiction? So if they test positive in a 3-month period, usually generally done through an 11-panel drug test with hair follicle, fingernail, toenail, or body hair. Body hair is like toenail, man. It's some legit stuff. You can go back. Well, you can go back with all of it. So 3 months is what they're going to care about generally. So if you can find cocaine in that, heroin in that, MDMA, if you can find an opiate, barbiturates, stuff like that. Okay. This would generally spike some concern. It's like, okay, this is in the addiction route. Okay. Even if they're not. So if you did cocaine once in 3 months and it shows up, that could be really bad. All right. So you don't want that. Courts generally jump at that. Usually. This may change. I don't know, but usually. But if you have that, this then changes everything. So if they sent you some bad text messages, they slashed your tires, and that's pretty extreme, but like, let's say they harassed you, they're acting weird, they showed up erratic at a school function, something, these things, this all then becomes huge. Now they're basically seen as somebody who has an addiction issue or an alcohol substance abuse issue in the courts, and it follows that protocol. So remember, family court is kind of like all these different things. There's real estate, there's abuse, there's violence, there's addiction stuff. There's all these things that are usually meant for particular courts that it has to make decisions on. Well, guess what? With addiction, it's really established what happens in that, if you can prove it in the right ways. So it's not just they're an alcoholic because I said so and they got a DWI or a DUI once or twice, or, sometimes there was alcohol smelled on the breath. Did they test positive in certain ways? Like, again, you should be going to family court and watching and looking at what judges care about, because this is one that happens all the time, right? You'll see it. And there's, if you can prove that they have a substance abuse issue in the way that the court cares, it starts a machine that's going to work in your favor, not because you're an angry person and want to make them suffer and you win, but because they need to get help. And you want them actually to have a role in your child's life, and you want that, right? So that's an easier protocol to follow than something like NPD. Right? So you got to look at how it's argued. You have to look at that, everything. So back to this, 3 points, 3 likely attacks, 3 ways that they'll counter it. You have to have everything tight. If you don't get this, if you can't do this, if this is too much for you to ask, you're walking into one of those mazes to lose that's very hard to get out of. Okay. That guys in my groups have had to suffer, and I've suffered with them to get them out of. Here's another thing. If you're testifying, if you're presenting anything, keep your answers under 30 seconds. Can you do that? Keep your answers to 1-word answers. Practice with being interrupted. Okay, this is really hard for me because I'm like this stream of consciousness person, and then I get interrupted and it all screws up. Family court, anything, depositions, for whatever, anything legal. I got to focus, man. I got to focus. It's hard to focus. It takes a lot of energy to focus, but I cut out all that shit. Quick answers, 1 word. Learn the language of not over-explaining, over-describing, and getting things to the point. Okay? So you have to understand courtroom etiquette. Your Honor, Stand when you're spoken to. Never talk over anybody. Okay? Keep your posture good, strong, dress well. You're going to be judged by your tone, your timing, and your control. Okay, so I think that in the way, so everybody always talks about the Constitution. In the Constitution, I don't need to dress nice. I don't even need to be respectful. I'm protected because I'm an American. Okay, that's the idea that so many people have, right? Now, I think it's wrong that constitutional rights are broken all the time in family court. But let's get this straight. This is for your kids, okay? Like any competition, any job interview, anything that's really important, you would want to do all those really important things that allow you to get any advantage. So, dress well, be on your best behavior, address judges properly. If they ask you to stand, stand. If they want you to sit, sit when speaking. If they interrupt you, stop and listen. Don't interrupt anybody. These things are really important. This isn't about being louder. I get it that she may be doing that. Bring it back to the order. I talk about this a lot, okay? Let's go over some witness stuff. Okay, so witnesses are pretty important pieces of evidence. I talk about this in many other videos, but the most important witnesses are going to be third-party witnesses. So at first, we might think that's coaches and teachers, but really it's court-appointed third-party witnesses. But witnesses are there to tell a narrative that's not emotional, that's not going to win somebody over, that's not Howard Hughes in The Aviator. It's telling facts and creating a narrative. That's the point of the witness, okay? An expert witness is probably one of the most important ones, and they're there for their licensed professional opinion. So they're an expert in something, and what they say really matters. Okay, prepping for witnesses. So when you give a witness testimony, you want to stay factual, you want to stay calm, you want it to be relevant to the narrative of evidence. All right, so it's relevant. What's the point of this? What law is it empowering? It's really important. Everything that you say, even if you're answering something and they're saying, well, instead of, you want to say yes or no answers whenever you're on the stand. Everybody always says that, but then they're like, describe to me what it was like the day you first saw your child or something like this, right? And you got to describe it. How does this empower the narrative? How does this get properly shared? I'm not some manipulator that's trying to trick the court and be charismatic. I'm not trying to make somebody look bad. I'm trying to be factual while describing something that's going to move into the point of what the statute is, right? And if I've watched enough family court, that thing that is free, easy to do, readily accessible to you, probably even right now when you're watching this. Well, if you're watching it, this is live, it's 1 a.m., so no. But at 2 p.m. on a weekday, probably somewhere in the US, you could get a family court case. You could watch it. And you know how to argue that point in the right way. Not in a made-up way, not in a way where you're going off of, some Hollywood courtroom rendition. It's not how it works. Okay. Avoid witnesses and don't get your hopes up about witnesses that are emotional allies. This is like family, friends, girlfriends, people that hate her, even her own family, right? I get it that wins an argument with your family and friends, that even her own mother or whatever, Okay, if you got everything else, if you got the expert witnesses, if you have some other third parties and you have really compelling, awesome evidence, bring that in. But that's not what's going to tip it over, okay? Might be enjoyable, funny, or whatever, all that sort of stuff. Okay. You need to do the next thing if you're preparing for court. You need to get around a group of people, okay? And you need to put you in the hot seat. Okay, you need to look at your strengths and your weaknesses. So before, you need to go through, what are my strengths and weaknesses? You write that all down. Okay, you get 4 or 5 friends, or you join a group like mine, and you write down your strengths and weaknesses about being cross-examined and all that sort of stuff. So do I get nervous? Do I forget? Do I break down? Do I get emotional? Like all that stuff. Remember how I said like it brings up all this chaos and childhood things or whatever. Who gives a shit? You can be an emotional wreck in family court. You just can't have it make you reactive. Like you can lose your shit. You just have to stop yourself. You need to regain composure. That could even help you in some ways. Might also hurt you, but it's going to happen, man. Man, okay. So YouTube, sorry about that. If you can tell me when my voice went out, like if it was 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago, that would be helpful because it would just help me in this. This is the second time this has happened. What a bitch. God, this really pisses me off because it's the same problem, but the TikTok dudes have a really good answer. Have a really good, what am I call it for me? Floki non-facile. Okay. Dude, what a bummer. Let me do this. And there are a few things to answer on this that are pretty epic. We'll do that. YouTube, if you're still watching, can you write in when you know if it was 5 or 10 minutes ago that my audio went out? And man, I'm going to switch my mic setup soon. So these are some really good questions that we have on TikTok and had some technical difficulties. Sorry, I'm glad you're back if you're back. But the fundamental question here that we have on TikTok is that how do I know if my attorney is bad? And how is it that not only that we know that my attorney was bad, but they're not returning my calls? Okay. So if an attorney is not returning your calls, if they're not communicating with you, I want to say first that this is common, and second, it's not appropriate. So this is where we get good attorneys and bad attorneys who both do this. And obviously the best attorney is the attorney that doesn't do this. So the attorney that is good and does this is oftentimes too busy and they're too frazzled and they're taking on too much at a time. Now, for me, not an attorney, but in coaching in this, it's pretty easy to take on too much and get yourself overwhelmed and get to a point of unmanageability. This is really easy to do when it comes down to the general, experience in the pressures and chaos of high conflict stuff. And so you need to, at some point, communicate with your attorney. I need to talk to you about this, and that, and can it be this week? Now, I want to add a couple caveats because we still haven't found the real answer. Is this attorney good or bad? Do we need to fire them or not? Is there time to fire them? We have a trial coming up because usually this happens like 2 weeks or a month before a trial, and that's not enough time. If you're going to switch attorneys, an attorney is going to want thousands upon thousands of dollars to be able to, make stuff happen and just even take on the case. So we want to look at a couple things. This has to do with attorney and client communication. Have you bothered that attorney or overwhelmed them? Because you don't want to do that. This is like one of the most important things about my group is that it helps mitigate that. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that that's going to be prevented. But if you're asking your attorney questions that are not important and things that don't make any sense, things that have nothing to do with the case, and again, you're walking into this, you don't really know much about family law. So it's one of those things where you're like it's pretty easy to overwhelm an attorney with things that are not necessary. So then they don't want to talk to you. So this is actually a real important thing. In understanding like how to interview attorneys, like we have videos on that. You should watch it. It's a good one. That one I actually edited because it was a live stream where there were also problems. And it's a pretty good edit to it, real clear. But how to find a family law attorney. There's also a book that we sell on it. The thing when it comes down to attorneys is we need to learn how to communicate with them. Okay, so if we can build trust with an attorney and we cannot overwhelm them with bad questions and we can learn what evidence works, if they're an attorney that likes this, which most do, they're going to want to work with us. This is good. And then they will return our calls. So that's an important thing to learn. But still now, we're now not answering Well, what happens with an attorney who does not talk to us and they're a bad attorney? Okay. And first off, if we're 4 weeks before a trial and you don't have a ton of money, you have to then make the decision whether or not to let them go, or like a very important hearing, to let them go and go pro se, or to keep them. Okay. So if you keep them, what is this trial about? What is this about? How could it hurt you? How could it hurt them? How could it hurt you? What are the consequences of it? So if it's a big trial, this is bad. Okay. And going pro se might be a gigantic risk that you don't want to do, but you could also lose a lot. So that's a tough thing. Like, this happens a lot in our groups. Okay. Another thing that you need to think about is that, is this attorney somebody that has done this before? Like, so if you worked with them on other things, and do they have a history of it? So for instance, one of my attorneys, he was awesome, was very bad at communication, but he always had it down in trial. Now, I understood that because there were smaller hearings where I saw him perform. Okay. It still sucks. It's still like an unacceptable thing, but we have to understand those factors. So I think this is like an important thing when we're working with attorneys. Like, it's not good that they don't call us back. Doesn't necessarily mean they're bad yet. It means they're bad at communication. It means it's not a good thing. It's not a great trait. But if they are bad, we have to find out. And the other thing too is we need to understand that attorneys that are good at one thing may not be good at everything. So an attorney that's good with hearings or trials, or maybe arguing something that needs to be defended. This was a big thing in what we talked about on our calls, I think last night, was that an attorney was really good at arguing different protective orders and so on, which is like, man, if you can do that, that's great. That's really useful. But that doesn't mean that they're good at being on the offensive and getting other things. Like, we don't know about that. So a good attorney is hard to find, because a good attorney, a real good one, is well-rounded and can communicate with you. You usually can't find a total package like that, which is tough. So this is why I always tell people, it's like, you got to know your case the best you possibly can. And then I think another really important thing is learn how to communicate with your attorney. If you overwhelm them, you're going to piss off every good attorney that can communicate, and you don't want to do that. So hopefully that makes sense. Man, you guys were telling me I was muted on YouTube. I have video evidence, but she read my DVTRO and created elaborate stories to justify the abuse. Okay, so when we see this, like, we're going into this, guys, and it's like, man, I have video evidence, but she's duping me in some way. So we need to look at, like, what video evidence do you have, and what does it mean? Like, that's really, really important of what this is. And here you're saying, okay, I have a court hearing on Tuesday. I filed DV. Okay, so you filed it, and she filed one back. And here is 160 pages of lies. Okay, we have to, like, this is so tough, because you're walking into this, and Tuesday you got to show up. Okay, so Tuesday you have to. Tuesday, if we're going in to try and argue to get our temporary restraining order made permanent or for a longer period of time, then we need to argue what gets restraining orders granted. Okay, if that's your situation. And if she also has one, then we have to argue how it's not dangerous. It's not just that she's a liar. Like, so a lot of times we go like, well, she's a liar, so it's all not true. Number one, why would the courts care? It's because either she's in danger, the child's in danger, or something like that. So we have to prove or argue that nobody's in danger. That's the first thing. And then if we're going for a TRO against them, it should be because we're trying to protect ourselves or our kids. So something or somebody's endangered. That's the main thing that you're arguing. Okay, so that's the most important thing to argue in all of this. If you're not arguing that, then it's just like she's lying and that stuff. It's kind of like when I'm talking about the court system just dumping evidence. We have our evidence really like organized. So this is difficult. So Tuesday we're going in, right? We can only prepare so much. I would watch some family court if you can, and if you say you can't afford it because you're working, then you're not realizing how valuable it is. So if you can, you can Google it or Chat GPT it. That's what I did. You can find these things, right, of when family courts are in session. It's kind of a pain in the ass because it's the government, but you can do it, and it's really worth it. That's going to be helpful to you. And those things may not be domestic violence stuff, but here's the deal. Let's say there's only so much you can do before Tuesday. Okay? So preparing what you can. But you need to realize you're going to go to court again. So Tuesday, we're going to learn as much as we can. We're going to go in there. There's going to be stuff that's going to infuriate you. There's going to be things that make you feel like maybe you're on top of the world. Maybe you win everything. And you go, I'm the best because I'm the best. You get your validation. Then you got to check all of that back. All of that needs to step back, and you need to go, what worked, what didn't work? What could I have improved upon? What was better? How did she screw up? How did she get lucky? How did I get lucky? All of that needs to be answered, because every time you win or lose, you're going to ask yourself those same questions. And that's where the gold's going to be. That's where you're going to get everything out of it. So Tuesday, we're walking in. We don't have that much time to prepare, but we're learning. And then after Tuesday, so before Tuesday, watch as much as you can of family court. After Tuesday, watch it. It's kind of like if you're in the water and you almost drown. I don't know if this is really true, but they used to say this: get right back in the water, because then for the rest of your life, you're going to be afraid of it. If you go into family court and it's good, bad, or ugly, go in again to watch so you can calm down and unwrite the myth of BS trauma in your head. Okay, well, it's not BS trauma, but unwrite the myth of trauma that's going to make you sit back and be a victim. Go back and watch it, because you can learn something. There's always something you can do better, even if you win. If you win, there's always something that made you lucky. If you lose, there's always something that made her lucky. Over and over again, you got to look at this stuff, right? This is with me. Like, it was so unfair what I witnessed and went through. And it was like, man, what could have done better? How did I screw up? So that's very important. All right. Do you help even though I have a lawyer already? Yeah. So here's the thing. Like, my groups are like support groups. So first off, if you guys are watching this and you haven't gotten my free 30-30 high conflict custody, by the way, I'm changing that to make it even more badass. Like, get that. It's free. It's free. It's so good. It's free. It's awesome. So that like, usually we encourage people to have lawyers, and you can join my groups, and it's kind of like we have therapists and legal assistants and me, and we work with you all day long, and it's very helpful. And it's awesome, man. We have a lot of guys that do really well, and we're always trying to improve it. Like I said, I didn't want to do this. This wasn't like, I'm going to create and design the best possible thing. This got made over 20 years to be many things, because my groups are about all sorts of stuff. It's kind of crazy. There was a guy who did a consult with me today, and I don't like doing consults. Like, sign up for my groups. It's a better deal, but of course, sometimes something so particular, you got to do a consult. And so he was talking about how therapy is screwed up for men. Okay. And we have therapists in our group. Like, this is an important thing. There's a lot with men that is overlooked in our culture. And so I have groups on all these things. So not just on custody, but on many different things. And so within that, there's a looking at so much that is wrong with everything. In any case, guys, it's 1:30 a.m. I'm going to go. Be well. Thank you for being on my TikTok, YouTube. I'm sorry I had audio issues. I think I'm just going to get a different mic. I have one, actually. I just think wireless stuff is so convenient, but I've run into the same problem twice, and I have to go back and look to see what I need to re-record, which means I will probably not edit it, which means that part of this was pointless. Because a lot of this is to not only produce content for you guys, but also stuff that I can edit in and work the YouTube and TikTok algorithms and do all that stupid shit that I hate because I just like to work with people and coach. Thanks, dudes. I appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon. Ciao. Bye. Ooh, ooh.